Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. Today it's my pleasure to review Sassoon Sassoon C.I.F. and F.O.B. contracts. Very important for anybody involved in international trade. This book is part of the British Shipping Laws Library. It's now in a 6th edition. It's been written by Filippo Lorenzon with Yvonne Baatz covering chapters 15 and 16. It comes to us from Sweet and Maxwell, Thomson Reuters. That's the book here, Sassoon, C.I.F. and F.O.B. It's a nice red cover, heavy book, hardback. Let's go for the back straight away and see where we are. We are 800 pages, give or take a few. It's paragraph numbering for the index. As I say, this is a Sweet and Maxwell Thomson Reuters book, detailed index, and the index, of course, is part of the Sweet and Maxwell's legal taxonomy structure, very much the house style. Then you've got some appendices at the back, a lot of information there. And then we get into the, after the appendices, which take up a lot of the book, we get to the structure of the book itself. Paragraph numbering, and of course lots of footnoting, lots of lovely footnoting, just for you. Then here we go, this is the front page, and then the detailed front page, with the names of the details of the two editors. Filippo is a solicitor, and Yvonne is Professor of Maritime Law at the Institute of Maritime Law at University of Southampton. Very prestigious. Now, the first edition came out in 1968 by David M. Sassoon. This is the preface to the new, to the 5th edition. There is no preface to the 6th edition, but what it's talking about here, that was actually written in January 2012. But however, what has happened is it's been modernised, because, as I will say in a moment, you'll understand the reasons for that. You can see the structure, table of contents there, the CIF and FOB contracts, common issues, various parts to the structure of the book. Then very substantial number of appendices. There are 14 appendices. So the first part of the book runs to about page 475. So what you're talking about at the moment is the index, the appendices are running. There's the main part of the book there, and then the appendices are a very substantial part of the book itself, with a large, obviously a large number of extracts taken from Acts of Parliament and so forth, the standard on carriage of goods by sea, etc. Now, I did, for my bar finals, the international trade module. I didn't have this book readily available when I did that particular paper, but I do find this book to be very, very easy to read. I didn't find the international trade module the easiest module. I'm sure my colleagues would agree. It wasn't one of the easier modules to do by any standards because of the complexity, but it's a fascinating area if you're involved in maritime shipping law. And of course it's a very important area in terms of money, and legally there are some very, very interesting issues. So what do we say about the book? Elizabeth and I talked about the book, and she wrote part of this review. For our review title, we gave it the following: the most important instrument of overseas trade. That's a quote. Unravelling the complexities of CIF and FOB. Now, having said that, let me just explain a little bit about what the book is, because it's been published by Thomson Reuters and Sweet and Maxwell. It's known as Sassoon, CIF and FOB, and it's been with us since 1968 in one form or another. And it's, I think, the stalwart voice of authority in what is widely acknowledged as an exciting, multifaceted and undeniably complex area of shipping law. The case law is useful too, because I have to say, when I did the module, it was my view that the case law was really very important, because you really have got to have a good understanding, a good grounding of the relevant cases, the main ones anyway. Now, the point I'd make about this book is that it's a highly regarded work, without any doubt, which has now come out in the new 6th edition, as part of the British Shipping Laws Library, which Sweet and Maxwell have. And obviously that does, to a certain extent, compete with Informa, who have done some books for in the past when they were available. Of course, Informa have a very substantial maritime library too. But this is a very useful one from Sweet and Maxwell. And whilst retaining the same logical structure of the previous edition of the 2012 work, the new edition contains a great deal of new material reflecting the substantial changes that have taken place in this area over the last turbulent 5 years. This, as the author, Professor Filippo Lorenzon, points out, is indeed an exciting area of commercial law, noting, for example, that a contract of sale on CIF, that's cost insurance and freight, terms, has for the last century constituted the most important instrument of overseas trade. Absolutely. Under a CIF arrangement, the price the buyer has to pay must include the cost of the goods plus their insurance against risk plus the costs of freight which carries them to their port of destination. It follows, says the author, that the performance of a CIF sale has both a physical and documentary aspect which creates legal and practical difficulties. Fortunately for the bemused practitioner advising on such difficulties, the complexities of CIF and FOB, free on board, are extensively and intensively elucidated and discussed throughout the 800 or so pages of the book, which provides any number of citations from case law together with views of other commentators. That again I thought was very helpful. It's a specialist area and an area which, once you get into it, is a fascinating area of commercial law and international commercial law. As for the FOB terms, free on board terms, its definition is referred to as flexible and therefore adaptable to a variety of practices and circumstances. Well, I was going to say they would say that, wouldn't they? But that's the way FOB operates. As the shape-shifting nature of such a term can cause confusion, especially if and when it overlaps with the terms of a CIF contract, it's useful that Part 3 of the book covers it in detail, supported by numerous references to cases which I alluded to earlier, and I think that's important because case law is a very significant part of this subject. We did find it useful that Part 1 of the book discusses the basics of CIF and FOB prior to dealing with the specifics, including the issues inherent in non-performance, for example, frustration, force majeure, and remedies. The book concludes with a discussion of such matters as jurisdiction and conflict of laws. And again, I think that's an important area because, frankly, I think having taught a little bit of this myself a few years ago now, I think there's a real misunderstanding sometimes of what the actual what that international jurisdiction is really all about. Notably, the final 200 odd pages, which I mentioned, contain the 14 appendices, ranging from the 1889 Factors Act to the Carriage of Goods by Sea Act, and to Regulation 2012 on recast. So you see, you've got a wide range of appendices at the back. Let me conclude by saying that with its detailed table of contents, 20-page index, copious footnoting, numbered paragraphs throughout, and 50 pages of tables of cases, statutes and statutory instruments, this long-established and authoritative work of reference is thankfully easy to navigate. It's not that difficult to read. I did find it, once you get into it, you pick it up pretty quickly. So therefore, I think that commercial lawyers and certainly shipping lawyers as well as academics will welcome this new up-to-date edition of Sassoon as an essential acquisition for the well-stocked shipping maritime law library. So I say it goes well with the Informa publications too. The publication date is cited 2017. Let's just have one quick look at it. It's a heavy book and I'm impressed with it. It's very much the stable of Sweet and Maxwell, opening it in the middle. Buyer's obligations under FOB sale. Here we go. You can see the structure, 1103, a lot of detail here. And then you've got the footnoting and all the other information running it through port of loading, uncertainty as to place of shipment, all the questions that are there. Then, of course, a lot of extracts. I did like the extracts from the judgments and the case law, which I did think was very good. And I'm sure Sassoon would be delighted to know that this book is going on from strength to strength. A very big thank you then to Sweet and Maxwell and to Thomson Reuters for their British Shipping Laws library, which I think is very, very helpful in the modern era. And this book in itself, I think, is a good explanation of CIF and FOB. If you're doing the international trade module or equivalent now for the bar exams, I think you should have a good look at this book. It's not something I looked at in any detail, but it was a long time ago when I did the exams and things have changed. A big thank you anyway to everybody concerned. Bye-bye.